Hello, good morning from Albuquerque, New Mexico, or good evening if you are in India, Nepal, or anywhere else where it might be morning, evening, or afternoon. Today, I want to talk about a few very important things. First, Mufti couldn't join us today due to some issues. The first thing I want to mention is that he will answer the questions you have asked about kafir. He told me that I shouldn't answer them. He will do it himself. That's the first point. The second point, which I've mentioned before and I'm repeating again, is about the word kafir in the Quran. There have been many questions about this word, how a kafir views the Quran. I'll briefly touch on Derrida's perspective because we have a lot to cover today and I don't want to take up too much of your time. In the Upanishads and the Vedas, there are dialogues just like Plato's philosophical dialogues. In those, Socrates answers a question, and even if the question isn't fully resolved in the end, Socrates always seems to win. In the debate, there is always a dialogue with the opponent, and in Indian philosophy as well, it's all about dialogue. Socrates tells a story, and Derrida uses that story. Why is this important for us? I keep emphasizing this point. Derrida mentions that Socrates said that writing did not exist then. In Egypt, their god of writing, Thoth, who has the head of a bird and the body of a human, came and said, I will give writing to humans script. He said, writing helps memory, it assists our recollection. Just like when we go to the grocery store, we make a list to help ourselves. Otherwise, if we don't, we end up forgetting things when we get there. King Thamus said that at first he wasn't quite sure whether to accept the art of writing the script, but then he said that everything has two sides. On one hand, writing allows us to preserve things, to store them, and on the other hand, the downside is that writing can actually diminish people's memory. What does that mean? In Sanatan Dharma, in the scriptures, students used to memorize everything and it was transmitted orally. The entire tradition was oral. The same goes for the Quran, as a mufti once told me. Hafiz would memorize and transfer it through their recitation. This could be transferred because those who transmitted it through memory are now gone, perhaps lost in wars. Why is this story important for us? I'm not reading Phaedrus, I'm reading how they crafted the argument. The story is important for us because, as Derrida says, when writing came, what happened was that the writer's real intention, like when we debate or talk, if we don't understand something, we can ask the person, and if we misinterpret, they can clarify. But with writing, it's frozen in time. We can't go and ask the author what they meant. We assume the author knows the real meaning. One thing has come up in many of my conversations, and that is the topic of cow consumption. Here, I want to show you something very important that people usually don't mention. I'm sharing this with you. In the previous video, we talked about the golden calf, which it is said that you cannot just sacrifice any calf or any cow indiscriminately. That is not allowed. Where is this mentioned? This is in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 70 something. What does it say? It talks about Moses, as mentioned in the Old Testament. Moses said to his people, Allah commands you to sacrifice a cow. Then they replied, are you mocking us? Moses responded, I seek refuge in Allah from being among the ignorant. But in between, there is a prohibition here. You cannot sacrifice just any cow or calf for consumption. Call upon your Lord to specify it for us. They said, call upon your Lord so that he may make clear to us which cow. For all cows, they said, call upon your Lord. So there is a repeated emphasis on calling upon your Lord. call upon your Lord, call upon your Lord again and again. The point is, not just any cow can be sacrificed, nor any field that benefits us, but only one that is wholesome and without blemish. Now you have come with the truth. So here there is actually a wrong interpretation that any animal or any cow can be consumed or eaten, but here there is a strict prohibition. This is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah in the same verse. This is actually your argument, because what I will say today is based on the question that was asked to me. For that, we will go back to the Old Testament. I just mentioned this in passing. Now, I will actually begin today's lecture. Last time, I quickly covered everything from our perspective, from the perspective of a non believer. Again, there have been questions about the word kafir. Many muftis have given their opinions and they have clarified it. How are we studying this? This is important because from the Arabs, there is currently a great deal of significant controversy surrounding the specific details of the birth of the Prophet. I mentioned this complex issue very briefly before, and I will certainly talk about that particular topic again later on. But here in this context, I will bring in the philosopher Jacques Derrida. Why? Because Derrida famously argues that when we read any given text, we can never truly or fully know its original real intention or the exact purpose for it being written. Instead, we are forced to interpret its deeper meaning for ourselves. The fundamental meaning of one specific text often comes directly from another previous text. In this one text, we have a clear reference to a much older text, such as the book of Genesis found in the Old Testament. I will mention that specific connection as well. Look, this historical record truly exists. Please give me a minute of your time. I really want to share something important with you. I will do it now. Stop sharing the screen. Today's primary lesson is that these specific Arabs are not actually Ibrahimic in their lineage. Okay, let us go back to what I said before. I am repeating it for clarity. Abraham had many different wives throughout his life. I mentioned these three specific women because they are very important to us and our history, not just Sarah alone. A young son was eventually born to Hagar, and he was given the name Ishmael. It is said that Ishmael is the forefather of the Arab Muslims, but that statement is incorrect. Today, I will show that with extensive research. Last time, I couldn't present it as clearly. Keturah was also there, and I will come to that, why she's important as well. Now, let us look at the lineage presented on this specific side. Just as the ancestral lineage of the Pandavas and Kauravas is crucial for our understanding in this context. So, who exactly is this figure known as Jacob, and why does he matter? Jacob is Isaac, and who is Isaac? Isaac is the son of Abraham. Isaac's son is Jacob, and from Jacob's 12 sons came the 12 tribes. These are Judah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. These are the 12 sons. Whose sons are they? So this is Isaac and Rachel. Rachel is Isaac's wife, and their son is Jacob, meaning Abraham's grandson. Jacob had 12 sons, his great grandsons, and from them came the 12 Jewish tribes. Then what happened? Let's look in Genesis. We see that Jacob had Joseph, in Genesis 39. Genesis is in the Old Testament. If we don't know this history, in Genesis 39, it says that even though Jacob had many sons, he favored Joseph. This is something we see everywhere. So, what did the other brothers do? Out of jealousy, they sold Joseph to Egypt. That's what happened. They sent him into exile. After that, Then he was accused of raping or sexually harassing her, but that's not actually the case, at least among the Jews. We don't know that. We don't have that information. We're just hearing what is being told. So he was imprisoned. He was put in prison. Then, I wonder what exactly happened next in the story. After that, what did Moses do? Moses led them out of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea and all that, which we've already talked about. You all know this. Just watch the Ten Commandments or read Genesis. Moses led them, and then on Mount Sinai, they violated the commandments. Anyway, they went on to conquer Canaan. There were 12 sons, but we have this story, and I bring it up from time to time because in our framework, we study this just like Hastinapur was divided and Indraprastha was given to the Pandavas. Their land was also divided among the 12 sons. Among them, the tribe of Levi, that is one of Jacob's sons, did not get a separate territory. He only got a list of cities. So the north of Canaan became Israel and the south became Judea. Why is this important for us? We'll come back to that. So, what is Canaan? There are actually several types of Canaan. 1200 to 586 BC, this is the Levant, and in modern times, Israel and Palestine. There were many different trade routes here because the Fertile Crescent area was very prosperous. In the late Bronze Age, these Canaanite cities were urban centers, but they gradually went into decline. Slowly, the people called the Philistines and the Israelites, both of them, the region known as the Fertile Crescent in this area, people like Joseph began to settle down, and then slowly things began to change. This is the historic Fertile Crescent. But what exactly happened here? We have all heard a familiar story since we were young, telling us that the 12 tribes of Judah, who came as Abraham's descendants, eventually became widely dispersed. Why did this happen? It was because of the powerful Assyrians. Who were the Assyrians? We will get to those details shortly. The Assyrians conquered northern Israel, while the Babylonians conquered southern Israel. Consequently, they became dispersed. That is their story. But actually, we don't really know for sure. There was an Assyrian named Pilser. Who were the Assyrians? We'll get to that. In the 7th to 8th century BC, the Assyrian kings like Shalmaneser V and Sargon III conquered the south. There were two parts. Above was Israel, below was Canaan, etc. They had 12 tribes. This is mentioned in their religion in Judaism that they violated the 10 commandments given at Mount Sinai. They kept breaking them again and again. Why did they do this? They became polytheists. They practiced idolatry. That's why, as punishment for their sins, this happened to them. This is found in all religions. So this is Assyria. What is Assyria? It's in Mesopotamia, in the middle of Assyria. This is ancient Assyria. Their main god was Ashur, who protected their military might, sovereignty, and empire. He was their real god, and there were others too. Interestingly, a statue of an eagle has also been found. Now, later, when we talk about African tribes, though I don't like the word tribe much, maybe clan is better, we'll discuss this. Even in pre Islamic Africa, there was always duality, one male, one female, and together they were worshipped. Ishtar was from Babylon, representing love and sexuality. So, what do we see here? One is military might, conquest, protection. The other is reproduction. This is like our Shiva Shakti. Okay, what comes next? Then Genesis 25:13 through 16 chronologically says there were 12 tribes descended from Ishmael. What's their story? Ishmael was the son of Hagar, Sarah's maidservant. Abraham had a relationship with Hagar, And according to them, Genesis mentions that after that, Sarah gave birth to Isaac and Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. From Ishmael, there were also 12 tribes. So both had 12 tribes. These are Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema. These are all the. Now, this part is very important. I'll read out the references later, but listen to this. The term Ishmaelite was not used in the Bible after the mid 10th century BC, and the term Arab appeared in the biblical and Assyrian sources from the mid 9th century BC. So, not with the Ishmaelites. One group of people migrates across the vast landscape, followed by another distinct population, leading us to wonder whose descendants are they truly? This complex question of ancestry and the intricate web of human lineage spans thousands of years and involves countless generations moving across continents. To understand the roots of these civilizations, we must examine the archaeological evidence and genetic markers left behind by those who came before. The story of human expansion is filled with mysteries about who settled where and how different cultures eventually merged or diverged over time. We will explore the specific details of these ancestral connections, the paths they took, and the legacy they left for modern society in much greater depth. We will come back to this fascinating topic later in our discussion to provide a more comprehensive explanation of these historical developments. I'll tell the story of Africa and a bit of Sind again about slavery, the slave system. Then again, this Barno Vaishmatajve, this Simsyad Damen tribe of Afghanistan, Ismail, this is Pidia's mission. Then there's a Sims, a South Palestine's Prishans Travan Karane. There's a Genesis Thrice-Evine, Joseph sold to the Medionites by his brothers. Kano's father also liked it very much. So, quote biblical text in Genesis 3:7. Presence light Vraishin sometimes calling the Tekedes Ishmaelite other Medionites the kinship upper Koristlais previously in the last century upper second millennium BCE. Any other sources like the Assyrian sources, Old Arabic, etc. So where did the word Arab come from? Where did the word Arab come from? In the Bible, there is nothing to show that Arabanana. So who were the Arabs called? There were some Bedouins and nomads there. They were called Arabs. The Assyrians who worshipped Asher and Ishtar, they used the term. The Assyrians were perhaps Mat Arabi Sanifi Samshi de land, Amda Haras Vede Sanis Mat Arabi Sanifi Samsi de land, Ame 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 Samsi de Syro-Arabian desert and Pravle Emin Semitic. So they were perhaps Semitic. Now we know South Arabic inscriptions as well as the classical Arabic texts that Rab designates the Bedouin inhabitants Amenion Sul distinct from the sedentary proposition. This is very important for us. When we do Islamic colonization in Africa, it's very important for us to do it. Let me tell you a little bit here. It's very interesting. The Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar. It's from the moon, but there was a huge cultivation in Africa. They had a lot of wealth. So Oda used to follow a seasonal sun calendar. And Dev, um, sedentary population means those who practice agriculture, who are settled, they are not nomads. Sedentary population. Then there is always reference to the Arabs in the Assyrian sources in the monolithic inscription of Salma Nesser III Assyrian. Then there is always reference to the Arabs in the Assyrian sources in the monolithic inscription of Salma Nesser III Assyrian, in which Gindibu the Assyrian mentions among the leaders occupying, opposing the Assyrian monarchy, Arabs from Arabayar, nomadic tribes and confederations of the Syro-Arabian desert. There were some nomads there. They were called Tema, Saba, Irabo, Efa, Kedar. These tribes are mentioned here. Now, Asurbacha, let us take a closer look at this. Asa. Banipal means Asur. Banipal means Asur is the creator of the era. This is what it means. And in the Assyrian language, his father Esarhaddon, at that time Mesopotamian Syria was called Assyria. During his time, Assyria had already developed into a great civilization. He gave the throne to him, and his brother Shamash Shumukin gave Babylon to him. He remained as a subordinate king. But what happened was that there were many wars on the banks of the Asur River. There were wars with Egypt, with Elam, and with a great rival. He fought wars with them, and his brother, who he declared rebellion against him, declared independence. For all this, Ashurbanipal, but ultimately he was defeated. According to many scholars, in the inscription it is said, Lauta Marhaza Ulisar, some parts, Lauta Marhaza Ulisar, Ishmael leaders. But the main thing is from the writings of Ifal, from which we have taken much, it is said that Hazael, king of the Kedarites, ended his leadership. From this inscription, from Ashurbanipal's inscription, or from any inscription, it is important to understand this. When they became Muslims, but this is their branch. Ismail's son, Delit Shabal, another for Campbell, and also Sumu, and from Sumail to Ismail. The inscriptions later, this Juari also mentioned somewhat. Here, from the Arabic sources, from Sumu, from Sumail to Ismail, this Juari also mentioned somewhat. Here, from the Arabic sources, it cannot be brought from Sumail to Ismail. Ismail Arab, what did he do here? How did he make the similarity? It's very difficult to understand this. If we look closely at the inscriptions of Ashurbanipal, there are a lot of writings here. It is mentioned there, Ota, son of Hazael, king of Kedar, and about its period of leadership. Here in the Abaitin inscription as well. Their specific names are clearly mentioned here in this text, but the name of Arab is not found here at all. Then we must ask, Ismai Isumu, how exactly did this name become Ismail? Our esteemed author, and I will certainly provide all the necessary references for you, argues quite convincingly that from this original form, the name Ismail can never be linguistically derived in any way. There is absolutely nothing to support the claim that Ismail came from this specific lineage. The biggest point to consider is that in the land of Judea, Nebuchadnezzar, the powerful Assyrian king, explicitly stated that where we found some nomadic tribes south of Arabia, they were historically called the children of Midian, but they were never once referred to as the children of Ismail. Josephus, the renowned Jewish historian, and Miller, a distinguished historian from Oxford University, have both very thoroughly and meticulously examined this matter. For the first time, he argued that the Arabs are the direct descendants of Ismail simply because among the Arab people the practice of circumcision is performed, and Ismail himself was circumcised at a very specific age. From that observation, and considering how this entire historical narrative unfolds, even when examining ancient Arab sources in detail, it is not entirely clear that any such specific tribe truly descends from Ismail. These people were primarily Bedouins and wandering nomads. Essentially, whatever the social structure of Arabia was during that particular era, that is exactly what existed on the ground. After considering that, the most significant point in our favor is the following. Let us take a closer look and see what their actual state was and which specific god they worshipped, because understanding this is very important for our context. Historically, every civilization had a primary state god. For instance, Asur was the deity given by the ancient Assyrians, and the goddess Ishtar was also prominently there. To explain this properly, we have to go back in time a bit. I have previously shown you the detailed map of the land of Canaan. The main reigning deity of Canaan, just as the mighty Indra is considered the chief god within the Rig Veda, the main reigning god of Canaan was known as Baal. What kind of deity was Baal? He was specifically the god of powerful storms, agricultural fertility, and life giving rain, because without the arrival of rain, there is simply no creation. Later on, well before the Israelites arrived in the regions of Israel and Judea, there was widespread worship of Baal. During the historical reign of King Ahab, a magnificent temple was built specifically for Baal. Please keep the map of Canaan in your mind. This figure is Baal. But this worship was intended for the settled population, those who had established permanent cities. We will talk about that in more detail later. So, regarding Baal, now the central question is for the inhabitants of Mecca how this Baal eventually became Hubal, meaning the Kaaba was originally the temple of Hubal. How exactly did this transition happen? In the Aramaic language, the name Hubal means. Now, someone might ask, is there any evidence for this? Yes, there is evidence. There is a statue with one hand raised in one hand. The second evidence is that in the statue, one hand is missing where there should have been a hand at the 1 o'clock position and another at the 2 o'clock position. There is a human figure filled with gold, which shows a control of definition, performing the act of tossing arrows before the statue. That hand at the 1 o'clock position was supposed to be pointing, but it was broken. It was a golden hand, and both Baal and Hubal had this feature. Many people might say that Hubal actually means Baal, and that Baal was the god of what exactly? Fertility, storms, and so on. I'm talking about Hubal from Al Khalil's Book of Idols. This is very important. I'm showing you the book. It's available on the internet. There are many references from this. The Book of Idols, its name is Pre-Islamic Beliefs and Tribal Data. This Hubal has been mentioned repeatedly. He was the main god, and there were three goddesses as well, which I mentioned before: Al-Manat, Al-Uzza, and Al-Lat. Allah from Allah. Okay, so regarding the recording, Al-Kablu, this is Kabli, and what was it? The image was red, made of red agate. Some say it was made of carnelian, the kind of pearls that have a bit of an opal quality with a pinkish hue. It's also related to the hand and the world. So here it's about sacrifice, offering. But then again, our discussion about the cow of the year comes up. These are primarily sacrifices intended for the deity. And this is also mentioned in the Vedas, etc. So it's a sacrifice offering to the god. Then, when they brought the golden calf in the real year, that's where Moses, this is where they violated it. It's in the 10 Commandments, right? Author 7 o'clock talks about something else. These 7 o'clock are more about deprivation, days, virginity, marriage. Why does the topic of action and fertility keep coming up? Because at that time, people needed to have children. There were so many wars, and infant mortality was extremely high. All right, so the image of Al-Kabli was first set up by Quizama. There were many plans in Mecca at that time. For documentation, we will also refer to Ibn Ishaq's book. According to Ibn Luhai, the leader of the Qusay tribe, he placed the image of Hubal in the Kaaba. As far as I have read, I need to clarify this further. I am searching, was the Prophet's mother from my tribe or not? It is said that he came from there. The date of this is disputed, but it could have been as late as the 4th century. It is mentioned that the idol of Hubal was brought by those who came from Baal, and similar deities were present there as well. Then the Quraysh tribe established it. After that, the place from which Abhijit was born, that sacred place, had a plan. There were two groups with different purposes. The first group established the temple, then the Quraysh took over and brought it into that temple. Eventually, the Quraysh became the most powerful, and they used to worship the idols there. All right, now something very important for us, Al-Kabali. Here, let me show you this book again. Pre-Islamic Beliefs, and the term tribal is a bit European. Anyway, this is the Book of Idols. You can find it on the internet. It's called Kitab al Asnam, or by Hashim ibn al Kabali. You can read it yourself here. The Prophet's grandfather, his father's father. Take Abu Muttalib, for example. Something happened there. Look, these things may have been created later, and I'll explain why I say that. The story goes that if you have 10 sons or daughters, you might have to sacrifice one of them to Hubal. I find this very interesting. The same message that Abraham received from the one God, Yahweh, or whatever you call him, that you must sacrifice what is most precious to you. Only then will I know how devoted you are to me. So the story we get at that time is the opposite, cemented in a way who is so devoted to him. Because of his immense faith in God, he went to sacrifice Isaac. But there are two versions. In one, before the sacrifice could happen, everything was saved. And in the second, after the sacrifice, life was restored. This is the story. But here, the idea of repeated sacrifice comes up. That is Abu Muttalib, who is actually Noah. The father of Biji's father, the grandfather, told him that out of his 10 children, he would have to sacrifice one to Hubal, and the arrows of fate and sand pointed out who it would be. Abdullah, Abdullah, Abdullah. This Abdullah became Muhammad. That means the name Allah existed before as well. It was one of their gods, you could say. At that time, he was spared, and instead, 100 camels were sacrificed in his place. This is quite similar to the story of Isaac and Abraham. The scholar who is currently writing about this specific period of pre Islamic Arabia is emphasizing this point once again. He notes that this figure, Abdul Muttalib, brought the young prophet as a small child to the grand temple of Hubal. And there, standing directly in front of his towering image, he bowed down in reverence. This particular detail is very important for us to consider because it reveals much about the historical context of the era. This canon about Baal, my scholarship has shown, and scholarship after scholarship has shown, that this cannot be the case. And I'm giving you that reference from another source. Um, the specific reference material that I have carefully collected from various sources, I'm giving you the references of the books from which I have collected these. And while not all of them are easily available, many of them can be found. Because there are two different things here. Um, it is not in this one, but it is in another. I will give you all those references. I am trying to make the other one 12, but it is a bit difficult because that's another 1 o'clock. It's in this one. Anyway, I'll give you those references. Among them, one is Ihul. Ismail, whom I mentioned, and his paper is available. I will give you that reference in detail next time. So I showed you one, the Book of Idols, and the other one is by Ibn Ishaq, which you can easily locate on the internet, and Fergus Miller. I will also provide his specific academic reference. His full name is recorded as T. Josephus. The Antiquities of the Jews is also available, and Josephus's own written book can also be found on the internet, Antiquities of the Jews. Besides the references I gave from different historians and archaeologists, not all of them are available on the internet, but many of them are. For example, today I showed that reference from Barakat. From Barakat, the prohibition regarding that cow is there, and in the same way, I will give it to you on page 1 o'clock, because in the updated version at 1 o'clock, the references below are not included. But about 50% of this can be found on the internet. You can read and check it yourselves. So what is important for us is that those Arabs where Islam originated were local Arabs, and their deities, the deities of Canaan, were polytheistic. And what Islam calls mushrik, that is what they were. But the influence came from the monotheism of Judaism, which they later rejected. Because according to them, Judaism violated their strict monotheism and did not follow the strictness of the oneness of God. That is why their concept of Tawhid, the oneness of God, is much more strict. Now, that's just one person. Someone might say, does family only mean lineage, clan, or blood relationship? If I consider someone my family, even though there's no blood relation, what's the harm in that? Yes, that's possible. Of course, it can be. But the claim here is not just about who is in the bloodline, it's something beyond that. There is a lot of research showing that the local people and even the most aristocratic families were like this. I mentioned the driver earlier, and now I'm opening this up and going there. Look at this tribe, this one right here. The Query tribe came later. All right. The Kuza'a tribe, this is most likely what I meant. Who is she? She is the Prophet's mother. But later they were removed and Hubal was still there at that time. Then, as we said, there were two more. People have made small tilaks as well. A boy, a man, and a woman. These deities, they were made of stone and they were removed. Here the Khuzar tribe gained power and another tribe drove them out. They were very noble, very wealthy, but they were descendants of Ismail. Keep that in mind. It's not proven. They were locals there, nomadic people from that area, but they were from a very noble lineage and they made it very grand. That temple became the temple of Hubal, and Hubal looked just like Baal. And here this story is repeated again. A boy meaning Abhijit, his father was Abdullah, which means one who is devoted to Allah. That means he was there too. The arrow pointed towards him. But that didn't happen. God saved him, just like in the story of Isaac. 100 camels were sacrificed in his name, in his household, but not him. He was a person from the community, Abu Muttalib. The little child Muhammad was brought and made to bow before that idol. He made him bow down, made him kneel. For us, this part of history is very important. What did the Arabs worship back then? That's why I seriously mentioned everyone from Syria, and Althusser also spoke about this. He himself was a Marxist. People often say that there was a complete break during the Russian Revolution, but that's not true. The old structure remained. Maybe some people were removed, but the structure itself wasn't completely dismantled. The same army, police, everything was used because a total change never really happens. The same thing happened here, the old pagan elements. The religions of those who were not called mushrik were greatly elevated. At the same time, many things were also trimmed away. So this was very important. And the prohibition regarding calves and cows was also very important to me. I hope that next time the questions you have about kafir, Mufti is a bit busy. He has some issues. He will come and clarify that. So that's all for today. Everyone take care. Namaskar.